Ukraine benefits from Russia's chaos, according to Kyiv. Ukrainian officials said on Saturday that the crisis in Russia was good for Kyiv, but it remains to be seen whether President Volodymyr Zelensky and his army can take advantage of the crisis tested by the march of mercenaries in Moscow this weekend. The founder of Wagner's army, Yevgeny Prigozhin, said on Saturday night that he would halt the March for Justice in Moscow after a deal that freed him and his followers from criminal charges. The agreement also exiled Prigozhin to Belarus. Today the world sees that Russia's master cannot control anything. Nothing. It's total chaos, said Zelensky, asking Ukrainian friends to take the opportunity to send more weapons to Kyiv. Kuleba said it was too early to talk about the fallout in Ukraine, but he spoke by phone with U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken later in the day to discuss the situation and the Kyiv attack. The United States Department of Defense later issued a statement saying that Washington will continue to cooperate closely with Kyiv as the situation evolves. The Ukrainian army announced on Saturday that it had launched an offensive near the villages around Bakhmut, which Wagner's army held in May after months of fighting. Kyiv also demanded the independence of the village of Krasnohorivka in Donetsk, but progress was slow. Zelensky recently said that opposition was slower than expected. Ukraine's Minister of National Security and Defense Minister Oleksiy Danilov said on Saturday that the Russian army will not withdraw from the Moscow front. Everyone is where they are. They're still fighting, Ukrainian state media quoted Danilov. A rebel mercenary leader, whose army was marching on Moscow, suddenly struck a blow to the Kremlin, leading to a 16-month war in the Kremlin and Ukraine, prompting Russia to withdraw. Shocking realization of the threat from the Wagnerian bloc troops under the command of Yevgeny Prigozhin, while leaving the field to protect the capital. According to the Kremlin spokesman, according to the agreement announced by Dmitry Peskov, Prigozhin will go to the neighbors of Belarus. While saying that it will not be opened, he promised for those who did not get immunity certificate. Putin had previously promised to punish those behind the coup d'état, once led by his apprentice, whose forces seized key military positions in southern Russia before marching into the city. In a speech to the country on the radio, he described the rebellion as betrayal and a betrayal. Peskov said that Putin allowed Prigozhin and his soldiers to be released under the pretext of preventing bloodshed and the unexpected outcome of an internal struggle. Moscow sets up checkpoints with trucks and soldiers south of the city in preparation for the arrival of Wagner's army. Red Square was closed and the mayor asked drivers to stay on certain roads. According to Chechen state television, about 3,000 Chechen soldiers withdrew from the fighting in Ukraine and rushed there in the early hours of Saturday. Despair. But after the agreement was reached, Prigozhin announced his decision to fight to stop injecting Russian blood. His soldiers had to return to the camp in Ukraine, where they regularly clashed with the Russian army. Prigozhin has called for the resignation of Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu, who has long been criticized for his war in Ukraine. On Friday, he accused the soldiers under Shoigu's command of attacking the Wagner camp and killing many of our friends. Prigozhin did not say that the Kremlin was responding to his request. Peskov said that the issue could not be discussed at a meeting by the Belarusian president and that he was the special head of the president. If Putin agrees, Shoigu's impeachment could subsequently undermine the president after describing Prigozhin as a traitor. A city located in the city of Rostov-on-Don, 660 miles, more than 1,000 kilometers south of Moscow, overseeing Russian operations in Ukraine in night video of the city streaming on the channel. Russian communication application people of Wagner cheer for the soldiers leaving Rostov-on-Don. Prigozhin was seen sitting in a car, and people greeted him. Some rushed to take his hand as he lowered the window. The district governor later said that all the soldiers had left the city. Wagner's troops and equipment were also located in the Lipetsk province, about 360 kilometers, 225 miles, south of Moscow. Authorities tightened security and restricted some movements by declaring anti-terrorism measures in and around Moscow. In the southern region, soldiers set up checkpoints using sandbags and machine guns. Workers dug up part of the highway to slow the march. Moscow Mayor Sergei Sobyanin announced on Monday a day off for most residents as part of security measures that remain in place, even after the evacuation. Dramatic developments come 16 months after Russia's all-out invasion of Ukraine, Europe's biggest conflict since World War II, with thousands dead, millions displaced and cities shrinking. Ukrainians hope that Russia's internal conflict will create an opportunity for its soldiers to return from the Russian army. Ben Berry, a land warfare expert at the International Institute for Strategic Studies, said that despite talks, Putin's position would weaken. These events will bring great comfort to the Ukrainian government and army. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said on Saturday night, shortly before Prigozhin announced his protest, that the march exposed the Kremlin's weakness and showed the whole Russian side, the messengers, the oligarchs, that it would be easy to take the Russian city. And really arsenals. Zelensky said in his daily video address in Russian that the man in the Kremlin is very scary. The president is completely wrong about treason. We are the lovers of our country, he said. The city, without causing a single death, not a single shot. Russian media, however, reported that Wagner's forces shot down several helicopters and a military communications plane. The Kremlin asked the Defense Ministry about the loss, but the Defense Ministry has yet to comment. All the military, economic and information systems of the West are directed at us, said Putin. Start with Putin's words. The broadcaster also spoke with senior Russian officials and lawmakers about their support for Putin, condemning Prigozhin and urging him to make concessions. Chechen dictator Ramzan Kadyrov, who clashed with Prigozhin in his criticism of the Russian army in the past, also expressed that he supported Putin with every word. The rebellion must be suppressed, said Kadyrov. Wagner's army played an important role in the Ukrainian war, taking the eastern city of Bakhmut, a region that had seen some of the longest wars. However, Prigozhin criticized the top officials of the army, accusing them of incompetence and leaving their soldiers without ammunition. Prigozhin in a press release accused the Russian army of attacking the Wagner camp in Ukraine with rockets, helicopters, and artillery. It is alleged that the chief of the General Staff, General Valery Gerasimov, after meeting with Shoigu, gave the order for the attack and decided to break the military agreement. The Department of Defense denied that it did not attack the refugees. Prigozhin, 62, is a former prisoner with long-standing ties to Putin and a lucrative Kremlin catering contract that has earned him the nickname Putin's chef. He was heartbroken in the United States when he and a dozen other Russian citizens were accused of working covertly with the media to influence the conflict before the election of Donald Trump. He was elected president in 2016. Wagner sent military contracts to Libya, Syria, and several Africa countries, and finally Ukraine. The rebellion of seems to hinder Moscow's war in Ukraine, as Kyiv forces are observing Russia's defense in the first stage of the counteroffensive. Orysia Lutsevic, head of the Ukraine conference at Chatham House in London, said the conflict could create confusion and potential divisions among the Russian military. The Russian army in Ukraine may be operating in a vacuum right now without clear instructions on the military, and who should monitor it, Lutsevic said. This is a unique and unprecedented opportunity for the Ukrainian army to serve as a military force, creates